Welcome to this session, and as all of us have seen around the show floor, around the sessions, there's a real buzz about AI. But AI has been around for a little while. At the GSMA, I set up the AI for Impact initiative with operators and partners already quite a few years back. And so in the industry, developments have been happening already for a number of years. But nevertheless, over the last 2 years, and particularly in 23, we've seen a real momentum building. We saw this AI becoming mainstream, I guess, partly because Gen AI moved out of the labs and was now a tool that everyone can use, and partly also because the mobile operators have increasingly adopted AI across their business to improve business processes, improve services, reduce network energy consumption, to tackle fraud, or to offer new innovative products and services. So we really have seen that build up over the last year in 2023. And at the same time, it's also catching a bit more attention because with opportunity come also new questions, new challenges, new risks, new threats. And so it's really paramount that when we think about AI, we also, from the outset, think about how to ensure AI is deployed and developed responsibly and follows sound ethical principles. And so that's something where the GSMA has been working with its members for the past 3 years to really move from what are these great principles to how do you adopt them in practice in your business? What's the governance you need to set up? What are the processes, the systems you need to have in place, the teams you need to develop? And as AI also is now becoming more and more mainstream, is becoming more and more pervasive across the business, other new questions include how to build your talent, how does this affect the workforce? How do we maybe make some changes across the organization to really unlock this opportunity, but to do that in a responsible way? And from a GSMA perspective as well, we're really thinking through how do we ensure this is an opportunity for all? How do we democratize AI? So I guess that's why there's such a buzz around the Congress this week. And that's also why we positioned it at the heart of this session today. So is 24 the year of the AI-Centric Telco? So we'll learn more about that through our fantastic speakers. The flow of the session is as follows. We'll first hear from Tor Indstøy, who is VP of Risk Management and Threat Intelligence at Telenor. And that will be followed by a panel discussion moderated by Moitje Cargo, our AI for AI director. And at the end, we'll keep some time also for questions from the audience. So please, when you listen in, keep those questions in mind, and we'll get to you as well at the end of the session. So to set the scene, I would first like to invite to the stage Tor Indstøy.
Hello, how are you doing? Thank you so much for allowing me to talk about my absolute favorite topic. So I'm asked to keep this on only 10 minutes, so that'll be hard, but this is a super exciting journey, and the stage that we are in now is absolutely great. So we have some opportunities now that is really, really interesting, and we have severe challenges. So we also, we need to balance this to manage, these new technologies. So this is extremely exciting. So I'll be talking about our setup. We have in Telenor, we have a program that we call AI First. This is the structure on this program that we have set up. It's fairly basic. We have on the top our AI Council. We have started 5 initiatives and 5 tracks. We have data as a product. As a telco, we manage and handle enormous amounts of data. And with data comes responsibility. So we need to handle this in a secure and trustworthy way. We also have thousands of employees. They all need to be trained on both the usage and the development of AI. So this is a big area. We have our ecosystem and partners, right? We are not a single company, but we are integrating through thousands of providers. So doing that comes a lot of interesting challenges and a lot of opportunities. We need to move ahead on the pace of the rest of the industry, right? If we're not, there will be some outliers that is just there and will die off. So we need to move our initiatives in a good and pace forward. And we need, as a company, we need to, do value realization. But my biggest, what I'm dreaming about at night and what I really love to work on is responsible AI. And lucky I have three good colleagues here, so we will discuss this in the panel as well. So within the responsible AI, we have several areas that we are focusing on. We have human values, we have human rights, we have data governance, we have safety and security, we have transparency. So we have 6 areas within responsible AI structure. And this is really built into our existing governance structure. So that will be interesting discussion in the panel today. What is the, how can we make this work efficiently? But I would like to challenge you guys on something interesting. Because when we are working on understanding risk and, understanding how responsibly we are on AI, we have the enterprise look, right? So we do that to build our company, earn money, and be a bigger company. So the interesting part, and I would like to challenge you guys on, is then, should we switch this around? Should we look at risk from a societally perspective, right? Should we try to put our lenses on and see this from the society? And that is interesting, right? Because that way we can actually support and build better and trusted structures in the society. And as Telco, we are bridged into everything you do, right? So this is interesting. So I'm actually going to show you a small video here of an old lady. She lives in Sweden. She has been robbed by fraudsters, stealing all her money. She has no money to pay, give gifts to her grandchildren. She is entirely broke. So they did that using advanced methods. They used that to use the deep fakes, and they used AI tools to be able to steal all her money. So it's a very short movie, and it is Swedish, so be aware of listen to her sore voice when she talks through this, and she talks about everything that happens. Let's try it out.
Jag kom in i mitt kök, vet ni vad Malin hon sa då? Din telefon är redan skickad till Ulmråksgatan 2. Men vad fan, jag har varken beställt telefon eller abonnemang. Sen föll min kaffekopp ur handen. Krasch, boom, hi.
So the entire song here is many minutes, but you can hear her sore voice on actually being robbed from all her savings. And this is interesting, right? Because this is not a challenge for Telenor, right? This is not a challenge for Microsoft. This is one poor lady that gets all her money stolen, right? There's probably reputational risks involved in this, but that's why I'm thinking, should we start on looking this from a society perspective? That is something that's interesting. Do you follow? Are you good? Great to hear you're still awake. This late at day. So if we just take a brief look at some of the technical tools that was used in conducting this. So she talks about that she met people she trusted, they built trust, and she knew them from before. So what they've done is actually using deepfake technologies to actually trick her. Right? So, and we did for 1 year ago, this is our CEO. I deepfaked our CEO. And it was quite cumbersome for a year ago. I had to use like 30,000 images to do that. Then I tried the same thing yesterday. So this is Rita, our EVP. So it took me 5 minutes work from scratch, 1 image, to put her in the Maldives. Right? Isn't that beautiful? That's innovation. There's positive sides and there's negative sides to this, right? So understanding the impact of the society is really, I believe, what we should do, right? We need to rethink how we do our risk equations. So, my take on this is somehow embarrassing, but I've been playing with this, So this is first time I'm actually showing to anyone. So let's, if we then go back to this old lady and try to, play her out in sequence, because she sings everything that happens, right? She tells the entire story. So let's try it out, right? So if we look at her song as an attack scenario and write this down on step by step, the attacker finds targets because he's old, lot of money in the bank, easy to trick, right? They make a fake version of the bank. And we just saw a demo here as well that you can use AI to create a professional bank website in 3 seconds, right? Splendid, fantastic tools, right? So we can start to see how, they're using SMS spoofing, right? Where they build trust. Her bank account used multi-factor authentication, so they had to get tricked through that, and using your human vulnerabilities. So all the way down to that they are transferring her cash out of her bank account. And the interesting part here is that if we see this as a sequence, we are actually modeling time from a risk perspective to be professional. And we can also map this to who should be responsible, right? Then we can see a societal mapping on both the regulators, the finance industry, us as a telco, Microsoft, anybody that is involved in these structures. So that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about that we should move from the silos way of working on risk today and move to a more, human-centric angle. And that human-centric angle, doesn't care about if it's security or privacy or fraud department, but that should be bridging all these things together, right? And it should be funneled into our existing governance structures as well, right? So, and that link is something that we as industry needs to work upon. Are you good? Good to hear. I'm happy. So, my last slide, our AI principles and the focus that we have is that we need it to be risk-based. And this is super important. Because we need to allow innovation. It's very easy to drown initiatives with requirements. That's not our take, right? But it's a really, really thin line to be on that balance. We really need to get it crowdsourced. So we are not going to sit there on an enterprise level and create policies and believe that this really is funneled through our thousands of employees. We need to engage people in this design. And we need to assess that people are held accountable for their structures, right? We need to build this in sales, and we need to layer it, and we need to get it integrated throughout the entire enterprise. I am out of time. I would like to talk for a week on this topic with all of you individually. So thank you so much for listening to me.
Thank you so much, Tor, and please do join me. Thank you so much on inspiring us. I hope it was interesting for everyone. Tor, thank you for bringing this story actually close to us and what it can happen. But now I would like to invite panelists, David, Carmona, if you can join me, please, Richard Benjamins, Dr. Khalid Basit, please. And we'll actually go back a little bit toward the AI-centric telco. And I think one of the things that we are hearing more and more this year is that mobile operators are moving toward either AI-centric thinking or toward AI-first thinking, like Telenor announced on Monday, or on just like a very strong AI transformation journey. And as a warm-up question, I'll go first to Richard to tell me just a little bit of what is your idea and understanding of AI-centric telco?
Well, very briefly, I think it's a transformation journey if you want to become AI-centric. But I think I should stress it's not just a technological transformation. Yeah, it involves organizational changes. It involves people. It involves business decisions, finance, economic impact, and it also involves people, of course, skills, culture. So you have to think about all those things if you want to create more value from AI.
Nice. And actually, these are all of the topics that we'll be talking about throughout this session. But maybe, David, over to you for your thoughts.
Yeah, then when I think about the huge transformation that is going to happen to operators in particular, you have to think of what are their strengths, right? What is their unique core value, right? So, and that usually start with the core of it, which is the network. So the new capabilities that AI is going to bring to the network, things like AIOps, bringing new intelligence, bringing automation, that is going to bring not only cost savings, but also new opportunities, new business opportunities. That for me is like the foundational one. Then it's exposing that to the rest of the organization, right? So that is also critical to see how that can permeate to everything that an operator does, from sales to marketing to every single process. And then finally, it's an interesting role that operators have. They are not only about transforming themselves, they are catalyzers for their customers to transform. And I think that's going to be a huge asset for an operator to play with AI.
Perfect. And Khalid, sorry, last but for sure not least, but I would actually like to encourage you to think and respond more from the transformation journey perspective.
Okay. I would ask you a rhetorical question. How well do you really understand AI and its applications? Okay. So we see a lot of hype. AI is really simply a pattern recognition algorithm. And when pattern recognition algorithms go from data to processes, all processes are cast in terms of a specific data pattern. And so AI is now moved into the realm of process re-engineering, process engineering, process transformation. And I think the challenge really is that how do you establish a framework in a company that enables responsible AI? How do you establish a framework in a company that actually introduces AI to generate new value? I think that's a conundrum still to be cracked.
Perfect. So I think all of us are now warmed up. Tor helped us, the entire audience, and now also the three other speakers. But Richard, I'll actually go back to you now also for the first question. So on the GSMA side, we started thinking about in 2023 about the AI-centric paradigm. And it was very interesting that in the beginning of 2023, there were only less than 5 mobile operators that kind of agreed with our thinking. As we progressed across the year, we saw more and more interest and more agreement to this. If we were to look now also the AI-centric thinking at the entire paradigm, there are some of the key enablers that are required. Which one would you say it's one of them?
Well, I would say, also in the light of the session, that responsible AI, apart from business KPIs, is also very important. I also want to stress that the great example that Dor presented is an outright abuse of technology. Yeah, so it's actually completely forbidden, independent of any regulation that may come or not. Yeah? I think what we face when we speak about responsible AI is legitimate uses that have negative side effects. Yeah? And in order to avoid those negative side effects, you need to do something. Yeah? I also want to make a short statement that there's always, says, we have to balance innovation with regulation. Yeah? We don't want to stifle innovation with regulation or with responsible use of technology. But I think what we should strive is not do one or the other. We should do both at the same time. Yeah? And I think there are benefits to do it at the same time. Yeah? Society is asking more and more responsibility of companies besides profit. Yeah? So if you do in a responsible way, you can actually have better customers and with your relationship with society. Customers also are more demanding responsibility of companies, employees. So there are so many business benefits of it that it's not becoming an or, but it's coming both. Yeah, and actually, if you do responsible AI by design, so you started early on. Actually, if you detect potential negative impacts, you can actually mitigate them in a very early stage, which is actually very cheaper and much faster than once you're in the market as fast as possible, which is what they call innovation. And then you have to withdraw from the market with a huge scandal on reputation, of influence, and you might get a fine. So the sooner you find out that even the purpose is legitimate, there might be risks on human rights, bias, exclusion, etc. So you better do it in advance.
And indeed, I think if you're moving across the Mobile World Congress, I don't know if you have managed to go from Hall 8 all the way to Hall 1, there is so much, everybody is talking about AI, and I think the second point that it comes next to AI is also ethics. However, nothing would happen if without data and systems. So David, turning to you, it will be great to hear your thoughts on how important data and systems are in this transformation journey.
Yeah, I mean, we've been saying this for quite some time, the importance of data and the criticality for your own data, right? So how important data is to feed this new era. I think that was a conversation last year. Actually, a lot had changed in the last year. Now, on top of the importance of data, we have to start thinking of the importance of knowledge. And the knowledge on any company, and in particular operators, the knowledge being built, I mean, Telefonica was announcing like 100 years. I mean, think of the knowledge that is there, right? So that knowledge is a huge asset that goes beyond the data. So with this new AI that is able to bring data and knowledge together, reasoning on top of that, and augmenting the capabilities of every employee to provide a better product, a better customer service, or anything that has to do with the future is amazing. It's something that I think we need to start thinking more about the breadth when we talk about data and what that means.
Yeah, and I love how you brought up knowledge and the breadth, because as soon as you bring those two things, there is also a leadership buy-in that is required. And Khalid, I would like to turn to you, because one of the things that we are seeing on our side is that when we are showcasing this AI-centric thinking to the mobile operators, particularly those that are only starting the journey, a lot of times we are hearing from them that on the leadership side, they're not necessarily bought in yet. What does it require for the leadership to become part of this game?
Okay. It really is a challenge, and in the work that I've done with the Telco Intelligent Automation Council and with the organizations I've been working with, it's very easy to fall in the trap of the low-hanging fruit, the cost reductions and the efficiencies. But there's only a certain point to which you can take it. It's actually very, very important to understand that AI actually intrudes, if you want to say, in terms of the way human beings think and the way we imagine and reimagine processes. So this is not about just introducing AI as a software download onto the PCs. It really is a fundamental discussion about changing the way people think about processes. So it's producing a cultural change. And I think it's very, very important for the C-suite to understand that it's the responsibility is beyond just declaring an initiative. The responsibility is beyond providing the tools. The responsibility is really about enabling the employees to really engage with AI in a productive way. And that's about establishing culture. And that's not an easy thing. It's not a 2-month thing. It's not a 3-month thing. It really is a very long-term activity if you understand the term that culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Nice one. I love it. And I think one of the things that we will discuss a little bit more later on is around awareness, reskilling, upskilling, which all of them is very closely aligned. Tor, I'm coming back to you.
Oh.
Sorry. So on Monday, you had a lot of different amazing sessions at the Telenor Group stand. One of them was also a launch on AI first thinking and an AI first journey. And actually, I'll kind of like go back to what David was saying and what Khalid was saying, and almost like how did this shift in thinking from Telenor leadership happen on Telenor's side? What was a turning point? Can you share something with us?
I also think it's a maturity journey, to be honest. As a from a company perspective. We've been working on various levels, so it's actually just a natural next step, I guess. So I've been working with AI like for 18 years, I think now. So it's and also the world eyes have discovered AI, so that is quite good. But I think it's a corporate maturity level that we're on now. So I'm happy to see it. I'm happy that they are spending 50% of their time. I'm doing, taking time on how much they talk about responsible part of AI. So, 50-50 opportunities and responsible.
Yeah, I'm loving it when I see everybody talk about responsible AI, especially from the leadership perspective. Richard and I were actually, and David, we were working on this since like 2018, 2019, 2020 was a lot of practices, etc. So it's a long story back. And now one of the things that we are seeing, and we are really looking forward in sharing even more, is how mobile operators are uptaking the importance of really implementing responsible AI into the design, from the design perspective. Richard, I didn't prepare you on this one, but I know you know how to respond. But I'll go back to culture shift. And I think you've been thinking a lot about it, and it's kind of like also around reskilling, upskilling, raising awareness. Telefonica is doing a lot on raising awareness, and I just want you to quickly share with us a little bit on multiple different things that you're doing across Telefonica in order to kind of like share responsible AI as also AI thinking across the organization.
Okay. So actually, we started publishing our AI principles about the use of AI. I must say it's about the use of AI, not about the technology itself, already in 2018. And then the next 2 years, we did a lot of awareness workshops with the business. We created a training course, which currently has been done by 4,000 of our employees that are more closely to this technology. We also made an inventory of AI systems. And we had no idea how many AI systems we have. We have more than 500 running every day. Yeah? And we thought maybe we have 50 or 60. Yeah? So that creates a lot of awareness. And then the responsible part, so we started working a lot with the ESG department because they work on human rights, on climate, and this is the S for the ESG. Yeah? This is human rights and an impact on that. And that also has created a lot of awareness. And we are proud that in December last year, we approved our internal AI regulation, 2 years ahead of the European AI Act coming into force. And of course, there are cultural changes because this is like any change. Yeah? So it's very similar to the change that happened in Europe with the GDPR. Yeah? Suddenly, a lot of companies needed to do stuff about privacy and privacy impact assessment and then legitimate interest. It creates whole new processes. We kind of piggybacked on that change for AI. Yeah? So we copied a lot. We were inspired by. So we have already data protection officers. That's actually by law. So now we also have responsible AI champions. Yeah? So there are people who sit in the business, and if a business uses, develops, buys, or sells artificial intelligence systems, those are the go-to persons in case of questions. Yeah? And the questions are like, it's not about is this allowed or not? Is it should I do it or not? Yeah? For instance, a very simple example. So of course we have a lot of data. We have data about the gender of our customers. Yeah? Sometimes we do recommendations. Now, do we want to do recommendations using gender? Yes or no? It's not a question with an answer yes or no, or good or bad. You have to think about it, and then you have to take an explicit decision on this. Yeah? So for instance, we did recommendation of devices, and we discovered that we use gender, so we discussed. Yeah? We looked at the impact, and we took it out. Yeah? Now, it might be a bit worse or not, and I would say the important thing is not that you actually take the right decision. The important thing is that you think about it, take a decision, document the decision, and if anything goes wrong later, you know why you took that decision. Yeah? So it's about the process, and that is the cultural difference that is happening in the companies.
Yeah, and perfect. And yeah, I think I want to stress, because a lot of times we hear a lot about like washing and that we are talking about things just for the sake of talking. I think here it's really important to stress that when we are talking about bringing responsible AI by design into practice itself, we are really looking at multiple different questions, hard questions. And it's not just operators themselves, it's actually from the also external committees where we bring different types of experience in it. Because it's a hard question, a lot of hard questions that it's not easy to respond, so it's certainly an ongoing journey. David, a colleague of mine called me the other day, actually last week. I was like, I can just ask David on the stage. But he was like, so I want to get involved more in AI. I want to pick up AI. I don't want to learn just about AI, but also about responsible AI. Tell me what is the best course I need to do. And I'm like, look, there is like so many courses. I have Mobile World Congress. I cannot tell you which one is the best one, but I can promise that I'll ask David, because I do know that some of the things that he has done in the past are amazing and really helped me. So if you were to choose one course, and it can be Microsoft's, which one would you choose? And I think it would be good because even Microsoft has a lot of different courses. If you can give us like really good response.
No pressure.
I'm gonna complicate the answer, of course, because when the first question that I would ask to your friend is for what? Because the way that we look at skilling is actually a bit more complex, right? And we look at like think of it as an inverted pyramid, right? Where you have at the peak of it on the bottom, you have super deep knowledge, technical knowledge that you need, for example, to create a model, to design the architecture of a model that is very complex. If that is what your friend wants to do, I can recommend some courses. There are a lot of them. But the reality is that as important as that is, and I see a lot of focus in that peak of the pyramid, it's the smallest one. So we're talking about thousands of people, right? The real meat of that pyramid gets when you go higher there, right? So you have then, for example, developers that are going to use those models, right? That is the next step. So we need to also upskill developers on how they can create new generation of applications that are leveraging the power of AI. That's the next one. But then on top of that, you mentioned, couldn't agree more, businesses, business leaders, right? So they need an entire cultural transformation to lead their companies in this new era that starts with leading the culture of their organizations to be transformed with AI. So that's the next one. On top of that, let's not forget people who are using AI. That's the most important one. So people who are going to use AI for the things that they do every day in their lives and at work. Super important. That's where we need to start talking about millions, right? So and now, when you talk about Microsoft, yeah, we do have, and I'm happy to share a link to your friend, an AI skilling program that crosses all of those layers. And yeah, we do have some very interesting training at the highest there. So how do I use, for example, generative AI to my daily life or to my job? How do I do that? How can I be upskilling my present job? Super important if we don't want to leave anybody behind. We have seen in other times how important it is every time that we go through a transformation, the last one, the digital transformation, how important it is to help people apply that into their jobs, right? Critical for that to happen.
Yeah, like perfect. Thank you so much. And I think one of the things that I'm seeing now walking across all of the halls, AI being everywhere, and I would dare to say that quite a lot of people don't necessarily understand AI, and that also a lot of ourselves, including me, need to actually pick up the game and get more educated. Now imagine what about all of the others that are sometimes using it, but not necessarily understanding what that means. And I think one of the things that you say is like, we do not want to leave anyone behind. And I'm really happy that we have a lot of mobile for development people inside the room also. Khalid, so I'm turning to you. And when it comes to reskilling and upskilling, I think in more developed countries, we are trying to figure out in what way to do it. And there is a lot of thinking that is going into it. But maybe something that we need to actually improve even more is how do we do it well in emerging countries? If you put your academic hat on, what would be some of your suggestions? And potentially even like, do you see the role of the GSMA in any of that?
Thank you. If you just permit me just to talk about reskilling and upskilling. Some of you have heard of Eric Brynjolfsson, and he's done a lovely paper on a contact center where he applied generative AI. And he lists 4 or 5 results of it. The first 2 are reduction of average handling time, customer satisfaction. then the three other that he talks about is how there's a greater uptake of AI by the individuals who are running the contact center. And then he talks about how the generative AI helped those who are the most least developed in terms of as contact center agents, they improved their performance. And it also led to a reduction in attrition. Now, so the question about reskilling, upskilling sits here, which is that how does the C-suite enable a team to produce a solution like this? Okay, so it's about enabling a team to think up of a solution using AI by which it's not just about reduction of average handling time and so on and so forth. It's about the better functioning of a team and reduction of attrition. Now, the question that you've asked, if you think about in emerging countries, labor is relatively cheaper. And so there's a natural attitude to say, well, why do I need to spend money on an expensive AI personnel? Why do I need to spend so much money on this sort of software when I can employ 5, 10, 15 people to manually work and do that on Excel? And from the regions that I work in, this is a real challenge. I think that it's important for those of us from the developed countries where if there's a safe way to share our implementations, safe way to share our learnings. I understand the competitive aspect, and obviously we all need to observe that. I think there's also where GSMA can actually help fund development of these sort of AI-centric culture incubation centers, such that the fears of the C-suite in terms of having to spend so much money and not necessarily see the ROI is, it can alleviate that fear. The critical thing really, and that's the bottom line, is that we need to make our learnings, positive and learnings in our journey to establish AI culture available across the world.
Perfect, thank you so much. And so one of the things that we discussed so far were mainly focusing internally. So what are multiple different components and enablers that mobile operators need to have in order to follow and progress on this AI transformation journey or toward AI-centric thinking? One thing that I'll do now is look a little bit outwards, especially because of all of the hype that has happened in 2023, starting with Gen AI, but then also moving into the regulatory and policy aspect. I would like to ask Tor now, how ready are we for the AI Act that is out and coming?
You know, I was just out there talking to a really small team doing some fantastic innovation. That was absolutely beautiful. They were going to create a medical device using generative AI. And it was absolutely mind-blowing initiative, so I loved it. But I was thinking to myself, I didn't say anything, you know, that path he has to go to be able to get this through is so humongous that it's not human to go through all the requirements you need to do to be able to get approved a medical device with generative AI. So it really is interesting, and it's interesting on how we do regulations, right? It's too easy to drown people with regulation, even though EU Act is a very good structure. I love it. Then, you know, as we discussed here as well, you know, we need to regulate all the way to developers and our leaders to take responsibility. So they say this is a huge area. So we really need to understand a better structure on how to do that global governance structure. As you also talked about in the previous talk on being able to, you know, bridge these regulations down to your governance structure inside Microsoft, right? So it really is interesting. I honestly think we need to rethink this, right? We need to figure out the requirements we set from a high abstraction level down to a detailed abstraction and actually do this as a more community going forward. So reaching out to all you smart people here to figure that out.
It's a complex question.
Definitely.
And I think it will require a lot of incredibly smart people. We also have on the GSMA side ongoing conversations with policymakers and regulators, especially around harmonization. But maybe Richard, before I go to global harmonization, I'll come Richard back to you. And are responsible AI practices helping with the prep for AI Act?
Well, definitely yes, because you start the cultural change journey already. You make people aware that it's not only about business and profit. There is another factor that you have to take into account. And in our internal governance model, it actually includes all the requirements of the AI Act. Yeah? Now, whether that is stifling again innovation or not, I think some devices, like medical devices, are regulated anyway. Yeah? So if you're a startup, you have a medical device without AI, you are regulated. You have to go through certain processes. Now, if you use AI, you have to do a bit more work, but it's not that it's either you are free. Yeah? So it is already been said, this is risk-based. Yeah? So the majority is not regulated, but there are some high-risk use cases that if things go wrong, they have a significant impact on people's lives. Now, that can be 10 people, but it can be hundreds of people or millions of people. So we have to take that into account. Now, so what is the overhead? So when we try to think about, so how do you put this in practice, that you comply with regulation and with your own internal structure? So the only, between brackets, the only overhead that you create is you have to register the system. Yeah? And that is an objective registration. What's the purpose? What are the users? What kind of data do you use? Personal data, sensitive data, open data? What kind of AI technologies? Is it simply machine learning? Is it deep learning? Is it generative AI? And then do you build it yourself? Or do you buy it from Microsoft or from a startup? So simple questions. Yeah? And then based on that, you do a risk analysis. Yeah? And the risk analysis doesn't have to be done by the business. Now, of course, in a startup, it's usually the same people, yeah? and that might be harder. But then there are many applications that where only a few risks apply. So then those risks generate requirements, and those requirements, they have to be met. Yeah? That's again with the business. So that might be some extra work that you have to do. But as I said before, if you don't do it, you might run in even bigger troubles later on. And if the requirements are done, then you check them, and then you're done. So it's not that you have to pass every single system through hundreds of questions before you can do it. No, you do it for the high risk, and then you leave it to the expert to decide, because it's not easy to decide, should I take gender out, yes or no? Well, it's just that if you have sensitive variables in your data, you have to mention that in the registration, and then other people will take care to see whether that requires a debate or not.
Thank you. And we'll be soon passing the microphones to the audience. So if you have any questions, prepare them. But before we start doing that, David, over to you. So on one hand, Microsoft also has incredible, well-developed, evolved, responsible AI practices. Quite a lot of things that, for example, AI Act is required, you already have in place. But still, like, if you're looking from the global perspective and how many different approaches we are seeing right now, how does an organization prepare for it? Like, how does one follow everything that is happening around the world on like a almost like weekly basis changes?
So to start with the good news, the positive side of this. The positive side is that at the principal level, so on the values, we are already quite harmonized. When you look at each regulation, they are all following the same goals. We are kind of aligned, definitely, right? I mean, of course, hopefully, right, we can get aligned on the ethical principles on how we're going to approach AI. So that is actually the most important thing. So we're aligned there. I think where we need to get better harmonizing, in particular, I mean, in the telco industry in particular, is going to be critical, right? Is how do we take that harmonization at the implementation level? So how do we make sure that then we can transform that into governance processes that every company will need to implement? And then the implementation itself, that every company will need to implement at every function. Again, AI is not something that is going to happen on a department, on a center of excellence, in a corner, in an operator. No, it's going to happen everywhere. Everything is going to be changed with AI. So that's major, right? So that's something that we need to think how we can make that. So when we think about regulation, I always think also, hey, how can we help companies? Maybe not Microsoft, we've been doing this. It's not the large companies, the ones that were worried. It's the smaller companies, the startups, that will also need to comply with that regulation. How can we make sure that we can make this as light as possible, not impacting, of course, the safety of AI, which is the most important thing, but at the same time, without leaving behind any companies in this case, right?
Perfect. So I'll go back to the audience. Are there any questions, or should I continue? Any questions from the audience? Hands up. And maybe, otherwise, I'll actually ask another one. And then when you're ready, just raise a... Yeah?
So it relates to the best practices that was briefly discussed earlier, and I'm just curious if there are any standards for information flow or sharing or any kind like that for actual application of AI inside of a business.
Yeah, David?
Yeah, so in our case, as we went through this process, so at the end, the core of this process is really, so you have your principles, right? Perfect. You have more or less aligned, great. Then you need to turn that into processes. That's the governance process. That means having goals, having requirements, and then turning that into implementation. So and we call there the 3 T's. So that is the training, the tools that you need to use, and the testing, right? So it's even the detail of how even every developer should approach that. So as we went through this process, what we did in Microsoft is actually documenting that, and it's available online. It's called the Responsible AI Standard. It's a great asset that you can use, at least for inspiration, where you can go through that process of, hey, how do I really have a central governance? Even organizationally, how do I do that, right? And then going in the detail, even to the level of, hey, what tools can I use to make this more productive?
Other questions?
I'll just add briefly also that Richard, mentioned also that another standard that is really good on understanding risk is ISO 31000. Really applies on the cycle of understanding risk, and those combined with development standards is actually gold. So I would look into that. There's a new one if you are also a security angle on the threat side. There's a new one, 31050, coming out soon, taking into account external threats as well. So that's interesting to look into.
And in between, I'll jump with a question. David, you mentioned startups. I think this is a really important reality that we are not talking about it. A lot of times organizations are going to have really big departments that can actually follow what is happening and get prepared, but we are really potentially keeping the startups at the back, actually, and forgetting. So certainly something that hopefully we will start looking stronger into it and supporting them on this journey. But while I'm mentioning startups, one of the questions to all of you, just quickly, is like, how important are collaborations to yourselves? And Khalid, let me start with you. And when I say collaborations, it's partnership across. We know for the fact that operators cannot do this journey alone. Who do you think are the partners that should be part of this journey?
Excellent question. My work has grown out of the consultancy I've provided for my company, Mercurial Minds. And when we engage with companies, we actually found that developing the understanding of automation, how to automate, what not to automate, we came across many organizations with similar problems. And that was the driving factor to set up the Telco Intelligent Automation Council, where it's become not-for-profit with a view to sharing knowledge, with a view to sharing use cases. And therefore, the collaboration is really about sharing similar experiences. For organizations who are at any spectrum of their journey, I believe there's 2 collaborations. One is the technical side, just to understand AI. And so those of us who wear the academic hat, we are available to provide that, okay? But then there's the other side, which is the practical side of automations. Exactly what to do first, what not to do first. I think that the whole attitude towards collaboration needs to be so much more well defined within us to say, we are here, we are available to discuss our use cases, our experiences with you. And it should really almost be, if it was possible to legislate, to instruct collaborations, my belief is that this is something that we should do. Because that's the only way by which you can make sure that there aren't any caveats that people are working with.
Nice one. I'm not sure we'll be able to push for legislation, but I think for now, one of the things that I would encourage is the interaction with all of the panelists after this session. In the meantime, any questions from the audience? Otherwise, Tor, I'm moving to you. And as you see, I'm quite fast, so next time, raise your hand fast. You made quite a lot of announcements on Monday on partnerships. How important are partnerships to Telenor?
It's core, and that's really, I really loved, they should be mandatory, it should be required to collaborate on any level, right? And we always talk about this, we talk about this for decades, that we need to collaborate better, and still, and now is really the time to get that structure out and running. So for us, it's core, it's partnership, not vendors, right? We really need to create value together, and that's hard work. And
David?
Key.
I love stacks, so you have seen that, probably because I was a developer in my past. So I also look at the ecosystem as one stack, right? And it's important that we partner in every layer of the stack. So on Monday, actually, we had this announcement of the AI access principles. And the core philosophy behind that is that this is not a technology, this is a new economy. AI is going to be a new economy, and it's much complex than looking at it just from the technology point of view. And therefore, it will also require new approaches to partnerships. And those partnerships can go from the bottom of the stack, so you see how we need to open the infrastructure so anybody can get access to, if they want, create their own model, and getting access to supercomputer capability so they can train those models. That's the most foundational. But then on top of that, you want developers also to publish their models. We talk a lot about OpenAI. Actually, in our case, we are hosting 1,600 models. So it is important that we open the ecosystem so we allow any developer to thrive in that ecosystem and to publish their models. And then all the way to application developers. Right? So we really need, and again, all the way to the final user. How do we provide choice, fairness to this ecosystem so we're not closing any of these layers? Because at the end of the day, if not all the layers are involved, it's going to be impossible to be successful with AI. Because again, this is not a technology, it's a full ecosystem that has to thrive.
Perfect, thank you. Richard, what are your thoughts on collaboration?
Yeah, so I always think in very practical ways, that are useful on the daily work. Collaborations, of course, are always good, but the type of collaboration an organization needs in AI depends on the goal, and it depends also on the maturity where they are. Yeah? For instance, one way is fully outsource whatever you want with AI to a partner or a vendor, and this might be good if you're only interested in getting the job done. You have no strategic interest in controlling anything, and you have no knowledge about it. Yeah? So that works, yeah, for some companies. You can also try to do everything in-house, which is increasingly more difficult with this technology to keep up with what's ever going on. So I would not recommend that. There are also lots of companies who outsource and collaborate for extra bandwidth. So they know what to do, they have a team, but they simply cannot do everything they like. Yeah? So then you can just pull in a partner, a vendor, you do some concrete stuff, and that's it. But you're in control, so they can't fool you. Yeah? The risk of the first one is they can sell anything you like because you have no knowledge. But anyway, you get the job done, and that's what is important for you. And the last one is what is called BOT, yeah? B-O-T, build, operate, and transfer. So that's for companies who have no knowledge. They want to be in control, but they don't know how to start. So you can first build it with a third party or with the partnership. Then you have the partners operate it, and once it's operational and it works, they transfer it internally to your organization, then you have all the knowledge. It takes a bit more time, but it allows you to kickstart, get the benefits, but also make sure that you're in control.
Great. So essentially, partnerships are crucial to the mobile operators, especially on the AI transformation journey. There are multiple different ways and approaches that one can take, but certainly something that we are taking very seriously. Maybe we are almost coming to the end of the session, so just for last time, I'll check if there is another question from the audience.
Hi, I hope the question is pertinent to the discussion, but I wondered with, I think Mr. Tor mentioned that there was the AI regulation coming up in Europe that will be implemented soon. And I wanted to ask if you think that Europe will have a competitive disadvantage compared to other continents due to, you know, the restrictions and regulations that are coming up.
Perfect question, by the way.
Fantastic question. I was going to leave the research. No, that's yeah. Would you take it? It's a very good question.
I can ask you a question. Is there today an AI regulation in Europe?
I don't think there is.
No, there is. Yeah. Is Europe leading in AI?
No.
So can you blame regulation?
I do not know.
No.
But are we going to fall even further behind?
Well, I think it's what I said in the beginning. Yeah? It's not you have to do things either responsibly or fast and innovate. You have to do both. Yeah?
But I can add, there is a very interesting Harvard study that compares the regulation globally. It takes into account the EU Act and takes into account Microsoft structures, Google, also, you know, the telcos in China and, you know, Chinese government and also very many other countries. And by that, you can actually see their focus on where they would like to put emphasis on their responsibility side on as responsible AI. So you see that the Asian countries, for example, have less on human values. So it's quantifiable in that respect. So it's a really interesting study, but to, you know, extremely good question. I would like to
David.
Just to add on that, I would turn it around. So what if that becomes your differentiation? Because at the end of the day, trust is going to be a huge differentiation. So without trust, AI is never going to take off. If Europe is able to provide trust to AI, that is actually a huge differentiation, right? So now, again, yes, you have to do that without compromising the innovation. So one thing doesn't mean the other, right? But it actually can be a huge differentiation to make AI thrive in the region.
But and then we can also discuss, you know, what is trust, right? That is transparency, right? And that's also a huge subject to discuss, also in the supply chain to us as operators, right? So it's, you know, that in itself is also a good discussion.
Can I make
another session?
Khalid?
In terms of regulation, why don't we flip it on the other side to say that in a democracy you have people who influence the legislators, and what is the power of those who influence the legislators to regulate? In what way will that actually impact the small players versus the big players? I think the subject you raise is an unending subject, but it's something that we do need to look very carefully about. And it's not about the technology, an absolute understanding of the technology. Because it's regulation, it means that value judgments will come in. And the way value judgments come in is through the nature, the democratic setup. And you can influence that. And therefore, you can actually bias it.
And we ran out of time, but I will ask, sorry, I will give you it.
Just a really quick question about ecosystems in Europe for startups. What's your opinion? Do you think there's a healthy ecosystem for startups here compared to, say, North America or Asia? Do you have a view? Because, you know, you talked a lot about partnerships being so important, et cetera. Obviously, that's startups, right, need to step up to develop.
Well, I think European ecosystems of startups are improving. So there are more and more. There are increasingly more hubs, but it's still not the same as in North America. But it's improving. It's a long discussion, but it's also a cultural difference. So Europe, I mean, if you look, Americans are more practical, Europeans are more theoretical. There is a huge social security system in Europe. Yeah? So there is a risk averseness that you have less security, social security in the US. So people can take risks, but because there are risks anyway. Yeah? If you look at the outcome of research projects, how many go to the market? It's a huge difference. So you can't blame that on regulation. You can't blame that. Access to VC capital, of course, is a difference as well, but it's also improving. So I think it's mostly mindset and culture that is a difference, and that will only change over time, if at all.
I can also add that, I think also we discussed the health sector and medical devices. At least in Norway, there's increasing need to get support on maneuvering in the regulatory landscape, right? Even though there are structures that you described that can be due to understand risk in this area, it's a complex landscape that needs to be maneuvered. So that is, interesting.
David, very quickly.
Just following my line, I'm going to be optimistic on this one, right? Because if there's one opportunity, that opportunity is happening now, right? So with this new paradigm change, this is an amazing opportunity to create that startup ecosystem, again, across the full thing. It doesn't mean that we need to compete on every layer, right? So there's multiple layers in here to really rethink of how we look from user experiences to business processes, all the way to the very foundation part of the technology that is going to bring opportunities everywhere. If we do this right and we bring that access, that equal access across that, not only on the stack, but also geographically, that should turn into a huge opportunity to really create a new ecosystem in Europe that can be even more powerful.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, although I do agree also with Richard that I think it's cultural. Culture is just different. I previously worked in Africa, and culturally we're just much different.
Can I make a point?
But the final thought, Khalid, and then we'll finish.
If you talk about the emerging countries, really, how much of an ecosystem actually exists. An ecosystem is something that's actually primarily driven by government sort of environment. They create an environment to support it. And in emerging countries, really, you have governments that are just about there to survive. And I think that it's important to actually support the development of ecosystems within the emerging countries. I think, as a final point, the desire for success in the emerging countries is so much greater because it's about survival. But as a consequence, it actually does drive some phenomenal innovation because you have to survive.
Perfect point. So I think 2024 is going to be even more interesting than ever. On the GSMA side, I'm very happy to let you know that we will progress the and even further uptake the AI and support to developed and developing countries. There is a lot of things happening that are going to happen on the startup side. There is a lot of things that are going to happen around AI-centric thinking for the telcos, but at the same time also will continue driving the agenda around responsible AI and policy. If any of these areas are of your interest, please do stay in touch. You can already find now quite a lot of different publications. Do reach out to us if you have any further questions. We will also be around this area if you would like to connect one-on-one and further discuss. Before we give an applause to our amazing panelists, I do want to say that there is another AI session that is coming just after this one, so we would invite you to stay around. And it's actually focusing on AI innovation for impact and climate action. And this might particularly be of interest to those that are interested in the startups and also understanding and building strong understanding where and what is feasible. So with this, thank you again to everyone for walking all the way to Hall 8, especially if you were in Hall 1. Thank you so much to the speakers. I know you're in a hurry. Let's give them applause, and thank you.